The Boston Celtics have officially been eliminated from the playoffs, and every possible indicator suggests that this team is going to experience significant restructuring in the offseason. With the decline of Brown and Holiday's shooting, the glass cannon that is Kristaps Porzingis, their Mr. Reliable reaching his late 30s, and worse yet, Jason Tatum tearing his Achilles, there is no way this Boston Celtics team is going to be back in championship form next year. But on the bright side, assuming that Jason Tatum can make a strong recovery, the foundations of a championship level team still remain here. And given the right series of decisions, this team can be right back on top of the NBA. So what's next for the Boston Celtics? Let's talk about it. As always with these previews, I appreciate all the comments where people go, "Oh wow, you got this up so quick." But obviously these are pre-recorded and this came out before game 5. I assume that will not affect the commentary. More likely than not, all of this will still be valid because we're talking about bigger picture stuff here. Have you ever caught yourself reaching for a bad habit without even thinking about it? Maybe it's out of stress, boredom, or just trying to fit in. Well, that's where today's sponsor, Fume, comes in. Fume offers a simple and enjoyable way to break from your bad habits while still having something satisfying to reach for. This award-winning device delivers natural flavor without nicotine, vapor, or batteries. It's not a vape, but rather a completely different approach. Just a subtle flavor more comparable to herbal tea than traditional vaping products. The device itself features a premium wooden design with satisfying magnet fidget components and an adjustable airflow dial. With so many flavor options, Fume serves as a custom potential replacement for other habits. Over 500,000 people have added Fume to their daily routine, and I completely get why. It's simple, satisfying, and does not come with the side effects of smoking or vaping. And right now, if you order the Journey Pack using my code RustyBuckets, you will get a free Fume topper. So if you're thinking about trying to change your habits, then this is the perfect first step. Go to tryfume.com/RustyBuckets or scan the QR code on screen to grab yours today, and thank you to Fume for sponsoring this video. So first of all, Jason's timetable matters a lot, and that will affect basically everything. He is probably out for at least a year, knowing the history of how Achilles tears usually go. And how good he is when he returns will basically determine the future of this franchise. Because if you get the worst case scenario and he's just nowhere near the player that he was before, well, you are completely fucked and you're just going to have to completely overhaul the entire roster. Now, what's interesting is the possibility that this presents with him being gone. If you wanted to tank at any point while he's here, now is the time to do it. How good is this current Celtics roster theoretically without Jason this year? Well, I think they can still be a solid playoff team if they keep the core players together, but nowhere near an outright contender. It would be a hell of a prove yourself season for Jaylen Brown, but to be honest, I don't think he's going to prove that he can be a championship #1 option because I just don't think that'll ever be what his ceiling is. But Derek White and Kristaps Porzingis are not awful second and third options, assuming that, especially with Porzingis, they can give you a pretty healthy season. And maybe you even make Peyton Pritchard a starter just for the sake of getting more offense out there. The way I see it, they have two different ways of approaching this. They can stand pat and make moves on the margins, probably still trading Holiday and Porzingis, but keeping the core of the Jays plus Derek White together. And the other route is completely overhauling and restructuring this roster with the plan to build up a new core player base around Jason Tatum upon his return, without Jaylen Brown. In that second route, there are also two divulging paths, one where they are competitive next year, and one where they bottom out and free up cap space and get a high-end draft pick. But let's start with the more conservative playing it safe approach, which I think is the more likely option here. Porzingis. Does he have to be traded? Well, I think on one hand, they really want to clear up cap space for the 2026 offseason, and he will be expired by then. However, as I mentioned, he is a glass cannon, and I think moving on from him is really important because while he's there, he's great. And that makes you really want for what that can look like. And you've seen what it can look like at times and seen how deadly it could be. I would go as far as to say that if Kristaps Porzingis was an Iron Man, instead of a glass man, then the Celtics would be repeating this year. But unfortunately, they do not have him regularly. And I think having that much dead cap on a player who's just not going to be available when you need him is not good. Like, he makes 30 million a year. Let's say that you spent that money on 3 different role players instead. How much better off would the Celtics be? Even if those 3 role players individually cannot be as good as one Kristaps Porzingis, they are still 3 people and not one, and they would be more available collectively with there being 3 of them. The problem with trading him is you're not going to get jack diddly squat. You can probably get expiring contracts, so you don't have to pay him $30 million next year, and then maybe one good role player. That's something, but it is not the end all be all. This damn Cam Link, bro. Now, how about Drew Holiday? Well, the big thing is that his corner 3-point shot that was so foundationally important to his success there disappeared on him. A big concern that I had with him when he went from Milwaukee to Boston was that his 3-point shot is just not very good, and that's a very prominent part of the offense. But then he went and shot 62% on corner threes last year, which is absolutely goddamn ridiculous, but he shot 31% this year. Literally halved that number. Dude, my hair looks so bad right now. Nobody look at my hair. God, it just won't stop sticking up in the back. Did I fix it? Sure didn't. He also hasn't hit a single corner 3 in these playoffs up until that game 5, and his off the dribble juice has also clearly regressed, so he doesn't really have the live ball playmaking that he used to. He also makes $30 million per year, and he has a $37 million player option for the 2027-2028 season. Another case of there's no way you're going to get an even value swap here, but you can at least actually get some good stuff here. Trading these two, you need to clear up your salary, and I imagine that is going to be Boston's #1 overall priority going into this offseason. They have new ownership, and they have a heavy tax burden. They are over the second apron, and they have 2 guys making $50 million a year, soon to be 60, and 3 guys averaging between $28 and $32 million a year. They are going to have to shed some salary. It is inevitable. Now, they can do that while keeping Jaylen Brown, however, so what are some potential Holiday and Porzingis trades where we just leave it at that? Well, starting with Holiday, what's the type of team that would be interested? Well, they would have to have a hefty amount of throwaway salary, and they also need to be a team with a short window for contention or at the very least high-level playoff play. They also will not be getting any kind of like good draft pick, although I could see you getting a first and maybe even 2 first-round picks if they're like bad first-round picks, but probably just 1 first plus expiring contracts, or maybe you get expirings and then one of them's a good player you can theoretically re-sign. The Lakers could offer Gabe Vincent, Maxi Kleba, Dalton Connect, Shake Milton, and a protected 2031 first-round pick. A pretty strong protection at that, because I don't think it's worth risking that for just Holiday. But Gabe, Milton, and Maxey will clear up $25 million in cap space when they expire for the 2026 offseason. And Dalton Connect is a kind of young player that you can invest in pretty heavily during a down season. Give him as much opportunity to show if he's a real player or not. Another idea I had is for Minnesota to get the secondary guard next to Anthony Edwards, because unfortunately Mike Conley is getting a little bit older, and this would also double down on their defense, keeps a veteran presence around Anthony Edwards, and takes some pressure off of him as a ball handler, only a little bit. However, they would either have to do a Naz Reid sign and trade to make that happen, or send Dante DiVincenzo, Mike Conley, and Rob Dillingham to Boston. I feel like either way that ends up being kind of an overpay, but if they really, really wanted to just be like, we are getting a definitive starting guard next to Ant, DiVincenzo, who's coming off of the bench, Conley, who's playing 20 minutes per game in the playoffs, and Dillingham, who does not play at all. It's not a terrible option, and Dante DiVincenzo's also been a terrible shooter these playoffs. I think it would be worth considering, but probably not. That's probably an overpay for Minnesota. Orlando could offer Cole Anthony, Anthony Black, and Gary Harris if they pick up the options of Anthony Black as well as Gary. but they would also probably throw in a few seconds or maybe a heavily protected first round pick. But I think Anthony Black has a lot of good upside. And again, he can prove it in a down year. I'd ideally like to get someone back who's a little bit more proven while still being young-ish, but this does clear $20 million in cap space, and it gives you a good young player at the guard position. PJ Washington, Daniel Gafford, and a protected first-round pick from Dallas would also further add to the defense-first approach of that team, with Anthony Davis, who can play the 5, Cooper Flagg, who will play both forward spots, and Derek Lively. I think either Derek or Gafford are kind of expendable because you're going to want to at least have some parts of the game where it's Flagg at the 4 and AD at the 5. So the amount you'll actually need those double bigs is less prominent now, and I think a lineup of Kyrie Irving, Drew Holiday, Cooper Flagg, Anthony Davis, and Derek Lively is sick. And then if you were to slide AD at the 5 and Coop at the 4 and throw in either Max Christie or Klay Thompson as a perimeter player out there, either way, which one you go with, that is also sick. So I like those options. Plus, with Gafford and PJ expiring, there's a good chance you can bring them back next year. But based on my understanding of how the timing of signings and bird rights and all of that work, like, you can go over the cap more if you had that player from the previous year, and you can sign them after you have signed people who were not on your team. You'll still get a tax burden, but you're actually capable of bringing those players in for that amount of money. I don't know. Salary cap shit has gotten way more confusing the last couple of years, so I'm mostly confident in this, but I am not certain. But with all three of these trade options, you're going to get more money off of the books. You're going to get a good player or two, and 2 out of 3 of these deals will also give you a young player with upside, but also one that is proven enough to, at the very least, expect a decent player. Then for Kristaps Porzingis, man, there's a decent chance they'll just keep him because there's nothing that they can really do. And again, he is expiring for 2026 anyways. But in terms of taking off of their tax burden this year, they could help in that department. But it would have to be a team that is some degree of desperate for a center. Not even some degree. They would have to be desperate. And they also have to have contracts that they want to throw away. And they're also probably going to be expecting to include no real assets. Now, the Golden State Warriors stood out to me loudly as a great team for this. And Moses Moody plus Buddy Hield, and then also Santos and someone else combined for $4.5 million. So that gets you like just short of how much money Porzingis makes. And I think Moody is a real player you can feel okay investing in. However, the issue is Buddy Hield and Moody, neither of them are expiring. I would look to reroute Buddy Hield somewhere else immediately with this deal for an expiring contract, and consider moving Moody at the deadline depending on how he plays in your down year. The only other trade I could possibly think of is maybe an overpay. But if Denver could do a Christian Brown, Najee Marshall, Dario Saric, and Peyton Watson deal, I do think that Porzingis next to Jokic is an intriguing idea. Even if Aaron Gordon has to slide to the 3, I think that works because he can defend small forwards. He regularly defends guards. But Brown is also probably a little bit too good to give up on. Though maybe just for the sake of not overpaying for him in the way that they did for Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr., out of fear of making that same mistake twice, maybe they would consider moving him, and Brown would be a really big get for Porzingis. If you could get someone of Christian Brown's capability at all for Porzingis, that would be great. But I don't think Denver would do this. Really, the Warriors trade is the only one that I think makes sense, because he fits what they want to do on both ends of the floor. It also makes up for Jimmy Butler and Draymond Green's lack of spacing a ton. But as I've mentioned a million times, trading for Porzingis is a massive risk. So what would a lineup look like after, the best 2 deals? Well, without Tatum going into the next year, it would be Derek White at point, Moses Moody at the 2, Jaylen Brown at the 3, PJ Washington at the 4, and Daniel Gafford at the 5. And in free agency in 2026, assuming Buddy was swapped for an expiring, you would have $48 million less on your books, which would make the Celtics one of the highest cap space teams in the NBA. And it would give you room to sign another starting caliber player and possibly re-sign PJ and Gafford as well. Then let's just say you bring the 2 back on team-friendly deals, and for about 30 million-ish per year, they sign either Aaron Gordon or Anthony Simons, a big two-way forward or a high-volume three-point shooting and scoring guard. So you either get a lineup of Simons, White, Moody slash PJ, Tatum, and Gafford, or White, Moody, Jalen, Gordon, and Gafford. Either option will give you PJ or Moody off of the bench alongside Pritchard and possibly a 40-year-old Al Horford. Either lineup is much younger, much more athletic, much less injury prone, and with the Anthony Simons route, you don't even become a worse shooting team. You actually probably become better. These are good outcomes, and I think keeping the Jays and Derek White together makes sense, and this is more likely to work out than what I'm about to suggest now. But what would the extreme offseason look like for Boston? What if they went full scorched earth by clearing a ton of salary, with the hope to tank, they get a high draft pick, and they use that plus their cap flexibility to do whatever they want? Let's say you trade KP and Holiday for expirings and Jaylen Brown for a cheaper star plus expirings. Said star plus Derek White plus Richard will ball out for about a year. Not Richard, Pritchard. Then you shed $100+ million in salary cap. You have at least one max slot available for 2026 free agency. You will likely have a decently high draft pick, plus whatever assets you got from these trades. I think this approach would work. So let me lay out a scenario for you. Let's repeat those Porzingis and Holiday trades that I said were the best, but Buddy and Moses are getting rerouted or moved at the 2026 trade deadline. Those moves combined clear $57 million in cap space. They would also trade Sam Hauser, which adds an extra $11 million freed up, bringing out a total of $68 million in cap space. Then we need to figure out a Jaylen Brown trade. Jaylen Brown is a good defender, a really strong mismatch punisher and finisher. He's a good post player, and if he bounces back, he's a really good mid-range shooter and an okay, if overzealous, three-point shooter. His playmaking has also taken a leap this year. Even though it's been less present in the playoffs, his regular season numbers were massively improved. But whoever is trading for him, I would hope is doing so with the idea of having him be the second option. However, I am also sure that there are some teams that are a little bit more desperate that would try to mold him into a number one option. They would also need to have a star caliber player to trade, and ideally not a forward. In fact, I wouldn't bother trying to make a Jaylen Brown trade unless it was for a guard or a big man. The big issue with Jason and Jaylen, that is the reason you would consider breaking them up, is the redundancy in their play styles. So don't get someone from the same position unless they play dramatically differently. Ideally, you're going to be able to get both a star level-ish big and a star level-ish guard because you either trade for one of them or you sign the other in free agency. And in order to maximize the salary, ideally, this star player traded for Jaylen is also making a decent bit less than 50 to 60 million a year, and they can match the rest of the salaries with further expiring contracts. That said, here are some of my trade ideas for Jaylen Brown. I mentioned this in the Cavs video, but Darius Garland, Dean Wade, and Jalen Tyson get the money combined. This move only clears about $14 million in cap space, but it would also get you Garland, who is one of the best point guards in the NBA. I recognize he had a bad playoffs, but he was hurt, and I don't think that completely writes him off as a playoff performer going forward, though I'm sure plenty of people are going to do it. He also helps their three-point shooting, and obviously he fits right into their decision-making predicated offense. The defense takes a hit, but I think they have the room to make up for it, and the offense improves. Meanwhile, he also takes a ton of ball handling and playmaking pressure off of Tatum. Imagine how much more effective Tatum would be if he didn't also have to be the best passer on the team on top of being the best scorer. Another idea I had was for Bam Adebayo and Duncan Robinson. Kel'el Ware has looked really good as a center prospect for Miami, and Bam Adebayo's offense has been on a serious decline in Miami. It feels like he gets worse and worse at scoring the ball as the years go on. So getting a more prototypical scorer to lead the offense at the wing position does make a lot of sense if this Heat team wants to be competitive while still shaking things up. This move also clears $19 million in cap space, and Cam Johnson plus Nicholas Claxton only clears $7 million because they're both on longer term contracts, but it does mean that you get two great starters instead of one star, and you could possibly use your total free agency money to just sign another good starter, and now you have Jason and then four good starters. I would probably try and go with a route that gives you another star, but this is at least pretty good, and you would probably get a pretty great first round pick as well. The Nets seem to be interested in trading for a star player, and this could be their backup plan to Giannis, because I don't think that one's going to happen. And as for the last move, which would clear up the most space, Austin Reeves, Rui Hachimura, Maxi Kleba, Gabe Vincent, and a first round pick. Literally all of those contracts are expiring for the Lakers next year, and I would try to bring back Austin and Rui, especially Austin, and they would presumably combine demand at least 50-ish million, but you would have more flexibility with bird rights and all of that stuff and timing, as I previously mentioned. Technically, with the Lakers trade, only Jason, Pritchard, and Derek White would be on the books for a total of $97 million, which is $122 million less than the average amount that is currently on the books for NBA teams headed into the 26-27 season right now. Not just projected salaries, not just like potential with who else they sign. Currently, NBA teams have committed $219 million per year on average going into that season. Not after this one, not after the next one, but the one after that shit. So this kind of flexibility is massive, and you could sign the likes of Trae Young, De'Aaron Fox, Jaren Jackson Jr., or even possibly, but no way. The option would exist, but no. But Luka Doncic technically could be signed. I don't think that's ever going to happen in a million years. Rudy has mentioned to me that there seems to be a lot of plans from the Grizzlies to bring back Jaren Jackson Jr., but there's also a decent chance Jaren is thinking something different right now. We shall see, but I do think he would probably be the best get out of all of those options. And even without the Lakers trade, even without truly opening up their cap space like crazy, you could still get guys like Anthony Simons, Fred VanVleet, Julius Randle, and on a lower end, Isaiah Hartenstein, Aaron Gordon, and Naz Reid. So with all of this, I'm going to lay out three potential lineups with a Jalen trade and signing a $30+ million free agent. Option one, which is the Lakers trade, which gives you maximum cap flexibility to sign even a borderline top 15 player. You get Austin Reeves, Derek White, Jason Tatum, Rui Hachimura, and Jaren Jackson Jr. For option two, you get Darius Garland, Derek White, Jason Tatum, Aaron Gordon, and Daniel Gafford. And option three is Anthony Simons, Derek White, Jason Tatum, Naz Reid, and Bam Adebayo. That one you're signing two lesser free agents. But also, if you wanted to just make that, I don't know, is it a PJ trade? Whichever one, that's also plausible. That might be a little overstuffed. That might be a little out of the realm of possibility. But one way or the other, all of this is without mentioning what they could also do with the draft pick they would get this year. Like if Jaylen Brown is traded, I doubt they make the playoffs unless that star that they get is just really ready to carry them over. So you'd probably get a decent lottery pick, if not at least middle of the first round, which could be used to draft someone useful or trade for a more established talent. All of these potential outcomes I think are awesome, and I trust the Celtics organization to be able to pull them off. But this route also includes a ton of risks. There is no guarantee that these deals will pan out, no guarantee that you can attract those free agents, no guarantee that they'll even be available by then. So if I were Boston, I wouldn't trade Jaylen Brown, and I would only do so if I was super sure that I was getting a great deal with good options to follow through on. You can never be certain of this, however, but I honestly have no idea what's in store for this team in general. So I guess we shall see. Let me know what you think they should do, some potential moves, what you thought of my ideas. I know a lot of them were out there, but I think there's infinite possibilities here. So this is just what I could come up with. I'm sure they're cranking up even wilder shit than this. But yeah, that is it. Shout out to Rudy for editing this video, and goodbye.